All right, so for those of you who don't know about Patrick Bet-David, Patrick Bet-David is a pretty prolific name in the YouTube business or entrepreneurship space. He really made a lot of his money and his name off of his insurance company that he started several years ago, and then he kind of pivoted over into YouTube where he talks about a lot of that. But today we're going to be reacting to a clip from his podcast that he's having with some of his employees about whether or not employers should be paying people better in this economy. Why did I say economy like that? I don't know. But in this clip, they talk about the restaurant industry in specific, and they kind of talk about the different struggles that the restaurant industry's been having. For those of you who don't know, the restaurant industry is not in a good place right now. And I thought that I could come at it from a pretty interesting angle because I've worked as a server in a restaurant for about 6 years now. So we'll go ahead and get started and see what these guys have to say.
Businesses say as many as 90% of candidates don't turn up to job interviews, and some quit soon after being hired. You're basically hiring anyone that would show up. Paul Horton closed his taco restaurant down in mid-September after being left with just 2 kitchen staff members. Horton said he'd spent thousands of dollars advertising jobs at Taco Crush, but that only around 10% of applicants replied after he hired to arrange an interview. Of those, he scheduled interviews with only 5% and 10% turned up. You can't be choosy anymore. You're basically hiring anyone that would show up. Some of the Businesses Insider spoke to added that some new hires didn't turn up to their first shift or that they quit after just a few weeks. Why would you go work today if you got money that's coming in? Why would you even go want to put that effort in there today? But what do you think about when you hear a story like this?
I don't think you're going to like what I have to say about this, to be honest with you, man. I think that quit your bitch and compete. You want better employees? Pony up. What you're not offering a compensation package that's getting you the type of employee that you want. Oh, nobody's going to work today. Yeah? I don't know, man. Do you think Apple's having trouble finding employees? Do you think
for a different job? Those are specialists.
Do you think Tesla's having trouble finding?
Those are specialists.
Hey,
then go get a job over there. You go get a job over there.
Go get.
No, you go get a job at Apple.
Go get what?
Go get a job at Apple.
I want a job at Apple.
Why not?
Because I got a good job here.
After your most recent.
All right, so to kind of rehash what they just talked about here, the story that they're breaking down is there's a smaller taco restaurant, and the gentleman running it has spent thousands of dollars in advertising to try and get new applicants, to try and get new people. And what he's finding is that a lot of people are just not even showing up for their first day after they've been hired. The competition out there for employees is really fierce, and a lot of people don't want to come back to work. So what this guy's basically saying is it's almost impossible for me to keep my doors open with what I'm doing right now. Now, Gerard on the right here, what Gerard is saying is, Gerard is basically saying, look, man, this is the free market at play. It's up to the business to offer a package that people like.
Comments, you might be looking to update your resume, buddy.
No, but the point then becomes...
Hey, we already established I can be as anti-Semitic as I want. Nothing will happen to me.
That's not true, buddy. We'll go. I'll get 30 lawyers here in about 7 seconds.
But the point is this. If you want that 6-figure job, go learn coding and go apply.
I hear you.
Go for it.
But then if you want to open a Taco Bell knockoff, get yourself some robots. Like, what do you want me to tell you?
Guess what this guy has to do?
Yeah.
Then that taco that's $1.99, he's got to charge $4 for it. You okay with that?
Hey, listen, man.
Are you okay with that?
You okay with that? This is the market at work.
But are you okay with that?
Anytime tacos go up in price, I am not okay. I think that's a guy bitching for no reason. He's not attracting.
No.
Listen, if you're not attracting talent, that's a self-evaluation moment.
Talent to
This
fold some
is
burritos?
not talking about.
This is the talent thing, dude.
This is the lowest of the lowest, dude. I made Whoppers at Burger King. Okay, you know how much talent it required for me to make those Whopper no onion? It didn't take a lot of talent.
Yeah,
I would put the patty.
So right here, they're picking Gerard apart for his point, which is basically, if you're not attracting the talent that you want, that's on you. Now, both sides are actually kind of correct here, right? Is this a talent thing? No, not really. These are beginner starter jobs that don't require a great deal of expertise or talent. But with that said, that doesn't discount Gerard's point. At the end of the day, if you're not offering what people want for them to come out and work, that is up to you in the free market to change what you're offering to get people out there to work for you.
From the other side, and I would line them up 3, okay? And it would fall off. My patties would always break. So if you ever had patties that were broken at Whopper, I'm a big I couldn't get these guys.
Fully qualified. Takes no talent,
fully qualified.
Takes
and
no
then
talent.
I would try to like put them pieces together like I'm playing this puzzle game. And then they would say no onions. I would forget I would put onions. And you're like taking a bite, there's onions, right? And all this other stuff. But anyways, that was my job.
Yeah.
I didn't need a 4-year or 2-year degree.
Sure.
Well, you should pay me more than whatever I was making at the time.
Maybe people feel like an hour of their life is not worth $7.
Then guess what? You know what the business owner has to do? Then this Whopper is not worth $1.99. It's worth $3.99. And you got to pay for it.
But this is the market.
You know, there's this thing called capitalism.
I hear you.
And the math, because there's only 100 pennies in a dollar.
Wait, the capitalism.
Yeah.
I love capitalism,
Yeah.
but there's land, labor, and capital. There's
Sure.
3 different sides
Sure,
of it.
of course.
Labor doesn't have to always take it on the chin here.
They do not. And they...
Let's stop it right there. I want you guys to hold on to what Gerard said here. He said, in capitalism, there's 3 factors. There's land, labor, and capital. And labor doesn't always have to be the ones to take it on the chin. We're going to come back to that in a minute, but I'm going to keep playing it.
Do not take it on the chin all the time.
So if labor's telling you I don't want to do your job,
for
this guy
this
needs to
position,
reevaluate.
this is not a specialized position.
I hear you,
though.
but what's he's not offering?
So then what you're suggesting is a $15 minimum wage.
Maybe what I'm suggesting is that this guy, all right, should go out of business. Is what I'm suggesting. If he can't attract people, all right, and there's not, and he doesn't have the clientele.
No, bro.
Right?
Do you know what pain these? So first,
you're
of all,
talking to a guy who went out of business, by the way.
You're talking to a guy that's had to work hundreds of hours a week for 15 years to finally be able to have the situation that you're in. So I understand the world of business and how it works. These restaurant guys' margins, they're working on 5%.
Totally.
What are you talking about?
But so what, Pat? If he is having trouble
attracting
employees.
What Patrick Bet-David is saying is 100% correct. You can even just Google it. The average restaurant is getting about a 3 to 5% profit margin, and more industry averages anywhere from 0 to 15%. So the profit margins are really not great on fast food and sit-down restaurant type business models. But let's get back to it.
What is his suggestion as to what?
So let me ask you a question.
To work for him?
But what I'm trying to tell you is this is a basic math question, and you're a math guy, okay? So when you sit there and you go through what the cost of your patty is, what the cost of the meat is, the lettuce, the tomato,
Which
all
is
of that.
going up.
This ain't cheap. This is a lot of cost.
Not.
And then all of that, nobody else cares about your business more than you. You have to work nonstop. You're there 24/7, 7 days a week. You're missing practice. You're missing time with kids. You're missing all that stuff.
Yep.
And your margins at restaurants are 5%.
How much is welfare? So if they apply for welfare, whatever, government assistance,
Yeah.
but they get paid more with that than
Yes, they will.
Okay, then. So
Well, I don't know about
so okay.
unemployment insurance,
Unemployment-
stimulus
so-
checks,
so my
everything that
question-
goes on with
So
that.
an employee.
Yeah, employees. So
Yeah,
my
yeah,
question
yeah.
is, okay, so you say like only 5% to 10% showed up. Maybe they're just going to these businesses and saying no after they get applied, just to show like,
Well,
hey, I
you
tried.
need six months. You got to be employed for 6 months before you can get on.
First of all,
Or just show that like for someone to keep
For
their unemployment.
unemployment,
Yeah,
keep
to be
their
like, yeah,
unemployment.
I
but
applied.
today, guys don't even, the lowest paying workers don't even have to go to work. The math doesn't make any
That's
sense.
what I'm getting at.
But the point is, when a Psaki comes out and says, if business owners decide to raise prices because of taxes, that is a unhuman thing to do. Whatever comment she made 4 weeks ago, we talked about it.
She's not an
Dude,
economist.
She is not an economist. Neither is Gerard. But the point I'm trying to make to you is you got a 5% margin. The specific story is restaurant. You got a 5% margin in this. Do you know why companies like Facebook or companies like these software companies can pay what they pay? You know what their margins are? What do you think is the margin of these companies? Don't say it. I want to hear what he says. What do you think their margins are?
Depends on the product, but I mean, their margins are through the freaking roof. I mean, look at Apple. Apple doesn't develop a single game.
Yeah.
They get, and they're the largest
So
distributor.
how
in the
much
world.
does it take to sustain the app? Nothing. You just have that platform, right? They got 40% margins. This guy's got a 5% margin. This restaurant guy is not a freaking rich guy that you think. This guy's broke. He's had a rough 18 months, and he's dealing with 5% margins.
I don't think that he's rich, but I think that he's not entitled to other people's labor. He's got to compete for people's labor.
Yeah, and just because he opened up a taco shop doesn't guarantee that he's going to be successful. Great,
Nobody's
congratulations.
saying, guys, nobody's saying this, but you guys are disputing math. You got a 5% margin you're dealing with. So if I
how
can
can
get
we-
He knows that going in.
Yeah.
He knows that if things, maybe it's 10% as
Sounds
well.
like
but
it
if
sounds
things
like a
don't
bad
work,
What Patrick Bet-David is saying here is, look, guys, it's a math thing. It's a question of math. The profit margin is 5% for this business. He cannot afford to pay people much more. And what these guys are basically saying is, well, look, man, it is what it is. He has to figure something out. And the fact of the matter is, even though Patrick Bet-David is really passionate about this and seeing this from the CEO side, they are 100% correct. If you want to get the more limited workforce right now, the more limited bottom workforce out to work, the fact of the matter is you have to figure out something in your business model, whether that's how you treat people, incentive packages, pay, time off, flexible scheduling, whatever it is. You have to figure out something that's actually going to get those people there to work for you. But let's keep watching.
Business plan, man.
Guys,
Yeah.
you're sitting here, you're talking as if these are restaurants, tens of thousands of restaurants you go to. So if these guys stop tomorrow and they say they don't want to do this anymore to serve you, you ain't got a place to go. You got to figure out a way for these guys to also survive. Now, margins-wise, if you're saying you got to pay more, no problem. But you also have to agree that they're going to have to raise prices 20%.
They're going to be raising prices.
So you're
anyway.
okay with that?
I'm not okay with it, but I'm not. You can't.
You
the
can't say
inevitability of inflation,
pay employees more, but don't raise
the
prices.
inevitability of inflation. Prices are going up anyway. Why would somebody? You're going to have I forget the term of it.
social stratification.
No, there's a term for basically it's like a disillusioned employee, right? So like when bread is $1 making $7, fine, I'll do it. When bread is $5 making $7 an hour, they're just like, screw it, it's not even worth it. It's an hour of my life for a loaf of bread. I'm not going to work.
Then if you're okay with the guy raising prices to meet his 5 to 10% margin, then he should pay more.
You're asking
Totally
if
fine.
I'm okay with inflation. It's a fact
I'm not
of
saying
life.
increasing inflation. No, you're saying to compete in a market. Competing in a market is meaning I have to go above and beyond inflation to be able to hang with other people.
Sure.
That's two different things. You're not saying to, raise it according to inflation. No, because the guy across the street from me that's a $50 billion fast food joint and a restaurant, I can't compete with that guy.
Let me ask you this then. Okay, let me take that.
Go back to the same Walmart and the market across the street.
Let me take that same logic. Okay, if I go up to that guy and I say, "Hey, look, your taco is $4, but I only got $3. It should only be $3. That's all I have. I only make $9 an hour. I can't spend half my money on a taco. Go elsewhere."
Yeah.
Those employees are going elsewhere.
Totally
He's not paying enough.
I get this.
They go elsewhere.
Gerard making a really good point again. I think Patrick Bet-David is seeing it from the business perspective. Is like, look, man, he's got a really low profit margin. He's already getting hit with inflation. If he increases his taco prices to compete, and with inflation, no one's going to want to come eat tacos. Fact of the matter is, you got to figure out something with your business model, because like Gerard is saying, is they're going to take their labor elsewhere.
This guy's,
it's too
you know how
expensive.
much money he's got in the bank?
Elsewhere.
You know how much he's got in the bank? How much do you think this guy's got in the bank?
Don't care.
Maybe it's
Well,
a
you
recruit.
should
He's not
care.
entitled to being a business
Is it a
owner.
recruiting
He needs to come
problem?
up with a better
I
business
don't
model.
disagree with the part that many people that are business owners shouldn't be business owners. I don't disagree with that. But the basics of math works this way. If you want me to pay you more, I have to make my margin back on this end.
Sure.
So I have to raise prices. If you're okay with raising prices, I'll pay you more.
And if he raises prices and the market suggests
Then your
that,
product sucks.
bingo. My thing is this, man. Nobody is entitled to. I'm not entitled to that man's tacos. He's not entitled to this man's labor.
Do you know how?
You're not entitled to anybody else's anything.
Do you know what
True.
percentage? Do you know how many people work in a restaurant business in America pre-COVID? You know what that number is?
I would bet
40
it's
million
pretty high.
people.
I would bet it's pretty high.
40 million people.
Yeah, over 10% of the population.
You know how many of them don't have a job? You know how many people in New York right now are getting crushed because they don't have the cash to survive? You know how many people are getting destroyed because they can't get people to come back to work? So they're like, dude, I don't even know what to do. Hey, honey, can you come and work with me? It's not because their product sucks. The climate sucks. This is not the small business owner's fault. You to say, screw you, get the hell out of here.
Right.
It's not how this thing works.
That's how innovation works, though, Pat. Is he
You're
offering
right.
equity?
And
Is he
we-
offering
and
paid days off?
it's-
What's he offering? If he
it's-
can't offer more money, what's he offering to
Sometimes when you're,
entice people?
when you're small, you don't have a lot to offer. That's why it's called small business owner. 49% of Americans work for a.
Look, Patrick Bet-David, man, is making a lot of excuses for the businesses. And I get it. He's 100% right about the fact that the climate sucks, right? Politically, politicians have been boning small business owners for the last 40 years, just completely dicking them. And I want to be as clear as possible. Most politicians suck at their jobs. With that being said, you have to innovate. You have to find a way. Hey, how am I going to make my taco place worthy of working at? The fact of the matter is, if you can't compete by raising wages to a desirable level, you have to figure something else out. That is where innovation comes into play. And it's not an ideal situation. Patrick Bet-David is 100% correct about the climate sucking. But at the same time, it is on the business owner to figure out the solution to that problem if they want to stay in business.
Small business.
I love small business owners.
Yeah.
This guy sounds like a bad business
It's
owner.
not one guy though.
Well,
We're not talking about one guy. It's plenty of guys.
Let me
that
say,
are going through this.
Pat's, it's whether this guy's got a good business model or bad business model, it's almost irrelevant. It's the climate that we're in. What was it? 2/3 of people were getting paid more to stay home during
That's
the
what I'm saying,
pandemic
yeah.
than to go to work. So that's part of the climate. Stimulus checks,
Yeah.
unemployment
That's a
insurance.
huge
We talked
issue.
about welfare.
Huge issue.
Yeah.
But let me say something. If you're an employee right now, we've talked about the great reset, the great resignation. People are, all right, do I even like this job? Maybe we're seeing left and right. 50% of the workforce is thinking about changing jobs. If you're an employee right now, you talked about paying your staff 20% more. I assume that's at PHP. Now's the time to go get your raise. I think if you're an employee, typically you get what, a 2 to 3% raise a year. Inflation,
Cost of living adjustment.
cost of living adjustment, all that. Now, with inflation that's going on right now, you should be looking for at least minimum 5%. Okay, minimum. But if you're really good at what you do, you're talking about paying 20% more. Go get your money. The time is now. As in, usually the power is in the business owner, right, or in the small business. Hey, we create the wages. You come work for us. Now, for whatever reason, call it the climate, call it the pandemic, call it everything that's going on. Now's the time to go get your money. So if you're in between jobs and you're not happy right now,
Yeah.
go get your money, and you'll get what the market pays you.
Yeah. Okay. The pain of a business owner. If you're not one, you're not going to know the pain of the business owner. If you don't know the pain of what a lot of these guys are going today that are creating jobs for people, you have no clue what it is.
Patrick Bet-David, again, is coming at it from the emotional angle of somebody who owns a business, and then he's kind of backing it up or retreating to the fact that it's a math equation. There's only 100 cents in a dollar. He keeps kind of going back to that point. And Adam is 100% correct here, the gentleman in the left in the gray, that now is the time to pivot jobs. If you don't like your job, go find a new job and go move up in the world. And that's exactly what we're seeing. That's why a lot of people don't want to work at restaurants, is because, look, I work in a restaurant. Let's just be honest, the work really does suck. The people are great. Maybe you like the place that you work as far as the food or whatever, but the actual work itself sucks. When you're in the restaurant industry, you're dealing with angry customers. A lot of times you're in super hot environments. These are not fun jobs, man. These are not quality jobs. So you can't fault people for not wanting to come back and work for minimum wage when inflation is taking off and they have all these other opportunities elsewhere and they've just been paid money to sit at home. Fact of the matter is the government shouldn't have done that, but that's where we're at right now. I also want to look at something else here. So what we have right here is the productivity pay gap. I kind of want to attack, obviously Patrick Bet-David is talking more about the actual restaurant or food industry in this video, but I want to attack this notion that business owners don't have more to pay employees, that employees are getting paid fairly in most jobs, because the idea that this is what the market will pay, it's like we talked about at the beginning. What we've seen for the last 40 years is labor's the one taking it on the chin most of the time. Labor is the one that's getting screwed over when a corporation wants to keep more profit. Let's look at this. What we have right here is a productivity pay gap. So this is basically showing how much productivity has increased since the 1950s to how much wages have increased since the 1960s or 1950s. So if you see here, pretty much they're coupled together, right? As productivity increases, the pay for the workers is increasing. Makes sense. They're coupled together. What we have is towards the late 80s, early 90s, you start seeing this kind of schism or this sort of splitting, decoupling, if you will, of what people are making versus how much productivity, how much work is getting done in the workplace. Now, there's a school of thought that this is maybe because of automation. This is because of, kind of Andrew Yang's platform, that this is because automation is occurring. There's all this extra machinery. Employees don't have to work as much, which allows the employers to make more. Regardless of if that's correct or wrong, let's look over on the right here. Productivity increased from 1979 through 2020. That's a 41-year time span. Productivity increased almost 62%, but hourly pay increased just 17.5%. That means productivity has grown 3.5 times as much as the pay. Maybe I'm cherry picking. Let's go over here. What we have right here is we have the corporate profits versus labor income. This graph basically shows how much is a business making in profit versus how much our business is paying out. So it's businesses, what they're raking in, to what they're paying out in wages. Again, through the 1950s, 1960s, 1970s, it's pretty fair. It's pretty equitable, right? You're seeing that as the corporate profits in blue, the blue line here, as they go up, wages, the line in red here, is staying about consistent with that. What we see, though, is in about 2002 here, you see all of a sudden corporate profits take off and just shoot up, and compensation for employees does not. So you're having businesses making more and more in profit, but only paying a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more in terms of wages. Now, what could cause that? Definitely the .com kind of era, the idea of websites and platforms like Facebook that have very little overhead. Absolutely. But this idea that labor hasn't taken it on the chin, or that labor shouldn't be looking for better pay, I completely disagree with, because look at this right here. You have a sort of decoupling of what companies are making and what they're paying. I want to scroll down here. So in the commentary on this graph, they added this at the bottom. It says, second, the trends of the two series tend to track each other over several decades, reflecting the general growth of the economy. The past decade and a half seem to be different, though. Never have corporate profits outgrown employee compensation so clearly and for so long. Now, that's definitely a conversation worth having. That's $1 million question, are a lot of the problems we're seeing coming from the climate with investments, politics, or is something else afoot? Maybe our CEOs being paid unfairly, our owners being paid unfairly compared to what their workers would be paying. Let's get back to the video.
I talk to these guys, and they have probably more anxiety, panic, 18 months, divorces, challenges, kids, issues than you would even know today because of what happened the last 18 months. And now you can't even get people to go to work? Yeah, that's what happens when socialism shows up and you give money away for free. When you start doing that, workers don't show up. So if you enjoyed this little short segment from the podcast that we did here.
So kind of ending out there, closing out, Patrick Bet-David says, look, this is what happens when socialism shows up, and when you're paying people out to do no labor, you're paying them to stay home, which is definitely what we saw with COVID. Were some stimulus checks necessary? That's a conversation to be had. But personally, I'll go out here and say I think too much money was printed. There was a lot of bullshit spending in government, pardon my language. And I think too many stimulus checks were handed out. I think we could have survived with just a couple, maybe the first two checks. Even the second one I felt like was really high. But I want to touch on this last point, which is we talked about here, the average margin for a food business is between 3 to 5%, right? Gerard kind of touched on it, is you're not entitled to your business, right? Nobody has to come and eat at your taco place. So if your business model sucks, then you need to change something. You might need to raise prices. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of food places do need to raise prices with what we're seeing right now. So there's a lot of industries that, as they get pressed here over the next couple of years with the economic downturn that I think we're headed into right now, they're going to have a little bit more leeway to pay people more to keep people. So if businesses like food businesses with their small profit margins want to stay as durable as some of these other businesses, the fact of the matter is that they're going to have to raise their prices. They're going to have to increase their profit margins. Maybe the CEOs will have to take a little bit less money, especially in some of these larger chains, to be able to stay afloat. It's not pretty, but that's the climate we're in. So although what Patrick Bet-David is saying is correct about the restaurant industry needs to figure out something with profit margins to get those profit margins up. And it's tough with food because food is something that is such a long-standing industry, right? It's really competitive. It is very competitive food. But again, CEOs today are making 278 times more than the typical worker. And what I think is really fascinating about this actually lends itself to what Patrick Bet-David was saying about the climate that we're in. From the 1960s, 70s, 80s, 90s on this graph, you have a pretty reasonable divide between what CEOs are getting paid and what the typical worker is getting paid, right? You have here in the 1960s, it looks like 1965, CEOs are making about 20 times more than the average worker. Completely fair. The 80s, about 31 times what the average worker is getting paid. Even in the 90s, about 60 times what the average worker is getting paid. Completely fair and reasonable. But clearly something politically shifted in this country between the 80s and the 2000s that really drove a lot of this change that we're seeing with compensation and the way that workers and CEOs are getting paid. Because look at this. From the 90s to about 2000 here, the average CEO's compensation went from about 60 times that of a worker to over 350 times that of a worker. This is literally off the chart. You see that? Do we see the number here in 2000 that's physically not even fitting on the chart because it's so high? You can't tell me that CEO's jobs suddenly got so much harder or suddenly they were so much more productive in that one decade from 1990 to 2000.